So welcome to my recap of House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 4. It's called two names. I've heard A Dance with Dragons, and also the other one is The Red Dragon and the Gold, which, a bit of a mouthful, doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Obviously, spoiler warnings if you've not yet seen the episode, and yeah, we're going to get into it. There's a lot to dissect, so get comfy, get some snacks. Let's go. We begin the episode at Harrenhal and Daemon's going through some things. He's had these weird visions, these things appearing before him. He's basically being tormented within Harrenhal, which in and of itself is a cursed castle. We see him walking through the throne room and he's hearing a muffled voice, and it's someone speaking in High Valyrian, a young woman, and we see young Rhaenyra. Millie Alcock is back and she's sat on the Iron Throne and she's wearing the crown, but it's too big for her head, and it symbolises how much pressure was on young Rhaenyra's shoulders at a very early age, and she had no control over that pressure. This was placed upon her by her father. Young Rhaenyra says, "You created me, Daemon, yet you are set on destroying me, all because your brother loved me more than he did you." Yeah, Rhaenyra gagged him in that moment. Hearing Rhaenyra say these things, it's the worst thing possible to Daemon, and in this vision, he reacts by chopping off Rhaenyra's head. I was not prepared for that. I literally jumped out of my seat like, holy shit. Didn't see it coming. And then for the head to keep on talking afterwards? What is happening? This is what you always wanted, is it not? Oh, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. We might have to circle back to that moment. But basically, Daemon is being tormented and he wakes up and his hand is bloody with cuts on it, and you can see the parallel between this dream of him harming Rhaenyra and harming himself in real life. Very nicely done, House of the Dragon. Then Daemon wakes up and he learns that there has been a raven, and we see him walking with Sir Simon Strong through Harrenhal, and Daemon is meeting with the Tullys of Riverrun. This young lad that he meets is Sir Oscar Tully, grandson of Lord Grover Tully, but he's basically on his deathbed, and Daemon is like, would you mind hurrying him along? Because if you're here and you're not speaking on behalf of your grandfather, why are you wasting my time? We're in a war. There is a sense of this pressure on Daemon that is really starting to build, starting to take its toll. I mean, he's always been a bit snippy with people, but now he's very short and abrupt, and you can just get this feeling that Daemon can't wait for things to just get moving. Like, let's get on with this. We're wasting time, and the longer we dilly-dally, the longer our enemies have to recruit men to their army, to gather their own resources. Let's get on with it. So, moving on, we are now at Driftmark, and we see the queen that never was, Rhaenys Targaryen, Princess Rhaenys Targaryen. She's walking through the shipyards and she has a conversation with Alyn of Hull. Now, if you've stayed for this video, I'm assuming you're cool with spoilers. Alyn of Hull has another name down the line, Alan Velaryon. Yeah, it's Corlys's son, as is Adam, who we met the other week. And I love this scene because there was respect on both sides. It wasn't like what we saw with Catelyn Stark and Jon Snow, where she could not hide her pain at what she believed had happened with Ned and some other woman. Rhaenys is the realist. She's the one. She does not blame Alyn whatsoever. She kind of puts him at ease, and I love that. Obviously, when Corlys entered the picture, he was like, okay, my wife and my legitimate son. Okay, let's move things along. Also, I know that, this is Westeros and shit like this happened all the time, but how could Corlys step out on Rhaenys? Like, the woman is beautiful. She's a princess. And Corlys realizes that he's going to have to admit that, yes, this is the same person that pulled him out of the sea, saved his life. And I feel like Rhaenys was a bit disappointed in that moment. Like, I knew this all along. I just needed you to confirm it. Now, my heart broke for Rhaenys, the first of many moments that it did throughout this episode. She says to Corlys, you know, this is the guy that saved your life, pulled you from the sea. You didn't think to mention any of this, like who he is, the relevance of this being your illegitimate child. So that was disappointing. I get why Corlys didn't tell her, but still. And Rhaenys has to come to grips with the fact that Corlys has living children. She no longer has any of her own. That's just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, that didn't occur to me till just then, and that saddens me, because she knows. Now, word comes in that Baelor wants them to return to Dragonstone. Rhaenyra is still MIA, and Rhaenys says it best. The council are not going to take young Jace and young Baelor seriously. So Rhaenys is like, get your shit, we're going to have to go and help them out. As Rhaenys has been doing this entire time. One thing you can never fault is her loyalty, because she's doing all of this for the sake of her family. And let's not forget, she does have this issue with Rhaenyra, because Rhaenys does not know that Rhaenyra and Daemon were not involved in what happened to Laenor. And this is the thing with Rhaenys and why she is just incredible as a character. She's so loyal to Rhaenyra and to her cause. She's set her whole life aside to help to bring this war to an end before it gets too serious. And she's doing all this, and she doesn't know whether Rhaenyra and Daemon were really involved with what happened to Laenor. There's still a question mark over that. But Rhaenys puts that aside because she realises that there is a greater struggle. And I also think that there is a level of, can I redeem myself from what happened 30 years ago when I was skipped over for Viserys? Like, it's not going to rewrite history, but I think for Rhaenys on a personal level, it's an important milestone to say, you know what, I can take a stand now. Fair enough, it ain't for me. I won't sit on the Iron Throne, but let me try and do this for another woman. And that's why she's just the realist. Okay, moving on to King's Landing. Oh, Alicent. Oh, girl. Like, really? So the Maester, Grand Maester Orwyle, brings Alicent essentially what is moon tea. Don't blame her. I wouldn't want Criston Cole's offspring either. And yes, we can get into how Alicent is a hypocrite, but I honestly think we're so far past that. Olivia Cooke said something really interesting in the promos, which is that after the end of episode 3, where she has that conversation with Rhaenyra in the Sept, and Alicent realises that Viserys did not mean her Aegon. Her perception was wrong, and she knows this now. And so now Alicent is, as Olivia Cooke said, starting out in a new phase of her life. It's the start of the rest of her life. And now we're seeing that play out because Alicent, she is looking for reassurance to back up what she's spent the past 20 years working towards. She asks the Grand Maester for his advice, like he's going to be impartial. And it's just, you can feel Alicent needs something to acknowledge what she's spent so much time doing. She doesn't want it to all be for nothing, but that doubt is there in her mind. So now we're back on Dragonstone and the Black Council has gathered. Rhaenyra is still absent. And you've got this man, Sir Alfred Broom. I don't like him. He's got a lot to say for a man who has not done a great deal to help the cause, put it that way. He's giving a lot of this and I'm a little over it. And we've got Baelor and Jace trying to keep everything together, but they're not respected because they are so young. And Rhaenys, she steps in and she tries to be the voice of authority. And the whole thing is just, it's a mess. And then Corlys, he storms, he kicks the door in and he's like, I'm back. And I do think that helped. It took the temperature down a little. The big takeaway from this moment, from this particular scene, for me, was Rhaenys continues to have Rhaenyra's back. She's constantly reassuring the lords, give her a moment, give her a chance. Let's just see what she does. And I very much appreciated that. We learn that Rhaenys is not officially Hand of the Queen. Rhaenyra never named her as her hand, but she is acting in that role regardless. And this is the thing I loved about Rhaenys throughout this entire episode, she constantly took up for Rhaenyra. When all of these men had something to say, Rhaenys was like, you know what? Stop right there. Give her a chance. She is your queen and you're going to respect that. Now, we move on to what is happening in the Crownlands, and Criston Cole is leading the Green Army and he's just sacking every town and city he comes across. And the people who are at the sticky end of the wicket today are House Darklyn, who had allied themselves with Rhaenyra. In fact, the Kingsguard that was by Rhaenyra's side, Sir Steffon Darklyn, it's his family, and when he returns to Dragonstone with Rhaenyra, he finds out what's happened. In this moment, Criston Cole is taking centre stage. He's dishing out the punishments. Basically, bend the knee or you're going to lose your head. And Lord Darklyn says to him, Kingmaker, really? And then he spits at him. He tells Criston Cole, you are not fit for the White Cloak. And he's absolutely correct. If anyone is the antithesis of a true Kingsguard, it's Criston Cole. So sadly, Lord Darklyn loses his head. Quick shout out for Gwaine Hightower, one of my favourite new cast members. I'm absolutely obsessed with him. I think he's brilliant, and I think he cuts through the drama with his sharp wit. And obviously, I'm not mad that the target of his wit is Criston Cole. Now, this scene ends with Criston Cole getting a letter, and I think it's safe to assume it's from Aemond. The two of them are coordinating their efforts. We jump to the Green Council in King's Landing, and Aegon, oh, he's not a happy camper. There is major discord within Team Green, and a lot of it is coming from these two brothers, Aegon and Aemond. Aemond says, Harrenhal, that's going to have to wait for a moment. We've got to look elsewhere, and he wants to go to Rook's Rest. But Aegon sees this whole interaction as him being undermined by his brother, which he is. Aemond basically informs Aegon, yeah, we're going to Rook's Rest. I've made the decision. And Aegon's like, I did not approve of this. I did not sign off. Yeah, I think the penny's starting to drop with Aegon, that his voice is not being respected. It's not being listened to, and there are reasons for that. He says, no, I want Criston Cole to turn back. I want Harrenhal. But Aemond, he is insistent. And it becomes apparent to Aegon that Aemond and Criston Cole have been communicating. And Aegon feels like the rug has been pulled out from under his feet. His younger brother is... Do I say he's usurping Aegon's position? It's not a nice feeling, is it? Plotting without my authority. It's not fun, is it? Then we get this moment where the two brothers speak High Valyrian to each other. Well, Aemond speaks High Valyrian. Aegon tries to. And Aemond is basically saying, you know, you are busy doing this, you know, becoming king, setting up your court, picking your Kingsguard, however dreadful they may be. And Aemond, this is one of his gripes. He has been preparing for this day for a long time. And Aegon is acting like this has just happened. Like, what do we do? And Aemond is 10 steps ahead of Aegon, and he does not have the patience to explain all this to his older brother, who really should be taking the lead on this. Now, my initial thought was, okay, Aemond is speaking in High Valyrian. He doesn't want to overly embarrass his brother, but judging by the tone of what they were saying, everyone in that room knew that this was not a friendly conversation. This was conflict between brothers. And it's Aemond challenging Aegon's authority. And Aegon, he is fully aware of this. He's just simmering away in his chair, fuming. Like, if steam could come out of his ears, it would. Now we move further into the Red Keep, and we have a scene with Alicent, and she is taken unawares by the arrival of Larys Strong, and instantly he clocks that moon tea sat on the table. So he's never off the clock. He's always thinking, gathering information. He is Varys before Varys was Varys. And I don't know if it was just me, but it does seem like he is being bolder in his conversations with Alicent. I think he sees the writing on the wall that she does not have the power she thought she would have, and he is just navigating around that. He's pretending to be her ally, but I mean, we all know that's not the case. Now, I have a bit of beef with Alicent for a comment she makes to Larys Strong. She says, only weeks ago, my lord husband was alive and the realm was at peace. Now I've barely had the hours to grieve one tragedy before suffering the next. Is she taking the mick? Are you for real, Alicent? Like, girl, come on. She cannot be serious. Surely. I mean, not to negate what she's going through, but have you met Rhaenyra Targaryen? The woman was usurped. Her father died. You didn't even tell her. She couldn't grieve him. She couldn't bury him properly as per Targaryen tradition. She wasn't able to have closure on that chapter of her life. She ends up having a stillbirth to her daughter, and then 2 minutes after that, she loses her son Luke, and then her home is attacked. I'm sorry, Alicent, I don't have much sympathy for you because you are part of the reason why this is all happening. And yes, you are now suffering the consequences of your actions, but that's no one else's fault but you, your father, the Greens. But what is super interesting is Alicent she's plagued with doubt and she's not sure what to do. And she's been searching through the history books just for any kind of reference to help her be guided in one way or the other. Now, I do feel for Alicent. She has a right to feel this way. But girl, pot kettle black. You've caused this situation. And also, you know that you were mistaken. You know Rhaenyra was not behind blood and cheese because she came all this way and risked her life to tell you, and you still sit on that information. You're not trying to make things better. You're just keeping that to yourself, even though you know the truth. You're not doing anything about that to try and bring this to an end. You're just sitting in your room, drinking moon tea. Yes, you're reading through the books, but it's a day late, a dollar short. Moving on to Harrenhal once again, and Daemon, he's still going through it. He's hearing these voices, he's hearing noises outside, sounds of people fighting. He's in this room that's dark and gloomy, it's leaking. It's like he's within a graveyard. So he instinctively grabs Dark Sister and he goes outside, but it's silent. There's no one there. So we see him look around and start to explore the castle. And then there is a figure that looks like it's what Daemon is chasing. And we come to realize that that figure is Aemond. And when he turns around, it's actually Daemon, Matt Smith as Daemon, but with Aemond's long hair and the eye patch. I was like, what the hell is going on here? This episode did such a good job at showing how haunted Daemon Targaryen is by Rhaenyra, by Aemond, and more to come. He winds up in what looks like the castle kitchens, and he comes face to face once again with Alys Rivers. Big shout out to Gail Rankin, because you've only been in a few moments and the fans, we are loving you as Alys. And the conversation that takes place between Alys and Daemon is amazing. And this is the thing, like Alys, she's working on a different level to regular mortals. She has these abilities and we don't know the extent of what she can do, but she's very mysterious as a character. And the way she's responding to Daemon in this conversation, it's freaking him out. He's like, well, how do you know how I'm sleeping? What's going on here? And she says, look, you're at Harrenhal. This place is cursed ever since the days of Black Harren. She says to Daemon, Black Harren, he destroyed, he cut down all of these weirwood trees that were so sacred and ancient and, in her words, heart trees imbued with the spirits of those who lived long before he came. It's said their whispers can still be heard sometimes. So she's freaking Daemon out because that's exactly what he's experiencing. And he doesn't know whether it's Alys, whether it's the castle, whether he's losing his mind. And of course, Daemon's natural reaction is to dismiss what she says. It's an old wives' tale. And then she just freaks him out even more. And then she just freaks him out even more by saying, you know that bed that you've been trying to get some sleep in? Yeah, that's made from the same material, from these weirwood trees that were chopped down. So Daemon, he's trapped in Harrenhal by this curse. And it's the way that Alys is speaking to him. She's talking so casually, but about very serious subject matter. And Daemon is like, what is going on? I really loved this entire interaction between these two characters. Daemon, he's about to leave, and Alys says, you've argued with your wife, haven't you? And kind of draws him back in. And she says, you've been here for some time. You've not sent any ravens. Like, what's the deal? And basically, she's holding a mirror up to Daemon and saying, what are you doing? What is going on? Just as he's about to leave, she says, you came here after falling out with your wife and you've sent no letters. What's going on? Are you pushing for your own claim? Are you trying to prove yourself to Rhaenyra? What's the deal? And Daemon, of course, he bites. He calls her insolent and a witch. Alys puts it to Daemon, are you happy that Rhaenyra's claim is being challenged because she was the one to replace you, even though we know he was never officially Viserys's heir? Now, my take on this is that, and I've said this for years, I don't think Daemon ever lusted after the throne per se. I think the issue is he doesn't want to appear weak in the eyes of society by stepping aside for a woman, to be replaced by a woman, because in this society, they still have these ideals, this toxic masculinity, what it means to be strong and brave. I think Daemon is 100% behind Rhaenyra, but at the same time, there is this vibe of, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be made to be a cook. I've said this for years. I don't think Daemon lusted after the Iron Throne. I really don't think that was the case. I think it's a red herring. I think he lusted after the approval and the affection of his brother, and he was constantly denied that. And he was constantly denied that. And now the same thing is happening again with Rhaenyra. This is Daemon's sore spot. He doesn't know how to handle the feelings that he has, including guilt, sadness, grief, all of these emotions. He does not know how to process them correctly. And the interesting thing about the ending of this scene is Alys approaches Daemon and they get closer and closer in terms of proximity, and Daemon starts to lower his wall a little bit. She's kind of charming him, and she hands him this drink and says, look, you're going to need some sleep. Please just drink this, you'll feel better. And he does, which is interesting because the episode before, he was not willing to eat the peas in case they were poisoned. So that is a change. And it's Daemon's going through all of this and he's trying to process what's happening. And really, he hasn't got a clue what is going on. This is stuff that Daemon Targaryen does not believe in. He doesn't believe in ghosts and scary stories and magical things. Like, he is very pragmatic. And he says, dreams did not make us kings, dragons did. He's very practical. But it's noticeable that the wall is starting very slightly to be lowered because Alys is so charming. And even though he thinks she's a witch, there is something about her because he knows that she knows that he's going through things. And he knows she's making these references, these insinuations. So I think Daemon does not want to bite the hand that feeds. He might need Alys Rivers. So he's warming to her slowly, shall we say. But whatever she gave him in that drink, the next morning he's still not all right. Like, there are lasting effects and he's not really able to focus in this meeting with House Blackwood. And what's so interesting is at the end of the scene, Alys gives Daemon a drink and says, you're going to need this to help you sleep. But we take up the next scene with Daemon in this meeting with House Blackwood and he's out of it. Like, he cannot focus. So something is going on, whether she slipped something in his drink. Maybe it's that in combination with the curse of Harrenhal, and sprinkled on top is Daemon's own guilt for his past behaviours. He's not doing well, he's not coping well, and the next thing he sees is a vision of his second wife, his late wife, Laena Velaryon. Big shout out to Nana Blondell for their return as Laena. I was not expecting this. I did not know this was coming, and this was a nice surprise. And again, Daemon doesn't really know how to react. Like, what does this all mean? Because I do think he has a lot of guilt towards Laena, and Maybe if they had been in Westeros, things might have been different. You just never know. And as much as he loves Rhaenyra, it doesn't take away from what he had with Laena. And let's not forget, this is the mother of his children, his two eldest at least, the mother of his girls. And they have never been the same since they lost their mother. So there's all of these things that are coming together, and Daemon, he doesn't know what to do. Now we jump over to King's Landing in the next scene and we see Aegon, and it's his small council, and things are not going well. Aegon is frustrated. He says, "You all bore me." He basically doesn't want to listen, and he gets up and he storms out and he goes to speak to his mother, Alicent. It's very telling that this young lad, I mean, he's not a child, but he's barely an adult, he goes running to his mother at the first sign of stress, at the first sign of him being overwhelmed. And this moment, this scene between Aegon and Alicent, it sets the tone for what happens later in the episode. He's basically venting to her. They don't listen to me, you know, they're talking about this, they're talking about that. What about what I have to say? And Aemond is getting credit, so is Criston Cole. Vhagar's getting applause. What about me? And it just personifies the way that Aegon feels underestimated, underappreciated. He's kind of a spare part in his own campaign to be king. The frustrating thing about Aegon is he's so close to grasping what it is that's going on. He says, you know, they don't listen to me. Okay, what do you do to rectify that? And he has a choice, but he, as we will see and as we will discuss in a minute, he flies right off the handle. But before that, he has a conversation with Alicent, and to be honest, I was kind of with Alicent on this one. She was just not here for his bullshit. So Aegon basically has a tantrum. He throws his toys out of the pram. He says, "My council are not listening to me. They're all off doing their own thing. No one's checking in with me. No one's asking my say-so. This is all meant to be about me. I'm the king." Cue Tywin Lannister. Any man who must say, "I am the king," is no true king. That stands as true today as it did when George wrote it and when Charles Dance uttered those words way back in season 3. He understands that his council are not heeding what he has to say. He does not have control over his advisors. They're all doing their own thing. Aemond and Criston Cole in particular. So Aegon feels undermined, which is a valid concern because he is being undermined. The question is, how does an adult handle this? And this is where it comes in, where Aegon, he is an adult, but mentally, emotionally, he's still a child. He's not mature enough to handle what is going on. And the rational thing to do in that situation is to think, okay, how do I regain control of my council? Now, this is where Aegon goes wrong. He goes too far. He goes off the deep end, as we will discuss in a moment. And I was very much here for Alicent. Like, I was nodding along with what Alicent had to say because she was not sugarcoating this for her son. She says, "Do you really think by just wearing the crown itself that you are imbued by wisdom? It doesn't work that way." Yeah, I was basically nodding along with Alicent Hightower. She did not utter one word of a lie in this scene. She says, "You know, we had such high hopes for you. You know, I hoped you would follow in your father's footsteps, a very thoughtful king." And that is not the case with Aegon. So far, he has just been flying off the handle. Alicent tries to impress upon Aegon that his advisors, you know, they've worked hard for their positions. They don't get it given to them the way he has. And she really starts to give it back to him with both barrels. He's basically like, "You better watch what you say." And she's like, "Or what?" And I don't blame her. She's fresh out of fucks to give. She basically schools him and says, "Look what you've been doing. You've been flying off the handle left and right. It's not the way to do this." And Alicent is really vexed about the way Aegon has dismissed her father, Otto Hightower. And I can totally understand why she feels that way, because it's been Alicent and Otto together for almost 30 years, all striving towards this one goal, which is to make Alicent queen, then to have a son. That son will be king one day. They're working towards this collective idea. And Alicent basically says, what are you going to do? Are you going to have me banished like you did your grandfather? A man who, I mean, I know I have my issues with Otto Hightower, but a man who is a competent politician, whether you like him or not, he's good at what he does. And Aegon can't even see that. She says, you should humbly be seeking our opinions and counsel. And that's the real Alicent coming out. That is her father's daughter. And it was just so telling that Aegon says, okay, well, what do you want me to do? And Alicent says, nothing. Okay, now we cut to the forest. We're at Rook's Rest in the Crownlands, and the Lord of Rook's Rest, Lord Staunton, he had declared for Rhaenyra, but Criston Cole and the Greens, they're outside his castle. So we know the stage is being set for a big confrontation, but before we get to that, we hop back to Dragonstone, and that is where Rhaenyra finally returns home from her escapade in King's Landing. And just as I expected, Jace is livid. He says, where have you been? Where'd you go? You can't just vanish. And Rhaenyra says, look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I kept it secret, but I had to do this. Rhaenyra admits, look, I've been to King's Landing. I met with Alicent and I tried to sue for peace. We've lost Luke. Jaehaerys has been lost. There's too much that's already happened. Let's nip this in the bud now. And Jace is having none of it. He's like, how could you risk your life? You are our figurehead. How could you be so reckless? And I understand how both of them feel. Rhaenyra did what she had to do, but Jace, he is very protective over his mother, increasingly so as the episodes go by. He's angry, but it's coming from a place of love, but he does ever so slightly overstep the mark with his tone, to which Rhaenyra is like, I'm still your mama. You'll still get an arse whooping if you talk to me like that once more. And Jace is not wrong. He has every right to be frustrated. The problem is he slightly oversteps the mark in public and Rhaenyra has to give him the look. We all know the look of our parents, right? Now, in this moment, Rhaenyra Targaryen just proves why I love this character so much. She says, I needed to know that there was no other path. I needed to try everything I could to at least clear my conscience at the very, very least, but also to try and prevent bloodshed. We've lost enough people as it is. If we carry on down this path, it's only going to get worse. So Rhaenyra is being cognizant. She's being mindful. She's being circumspect. She's thinking about the greater implications, and it all ties in with the conversation she's about to have with Jace. But before we move on, Rhaenyra does come to a conclusion that, I've tried everything and it is what it is. We're going to have to throw the dragons into the mix because diplomacy is getting me nowhere. She says it boils down to I either win my claim or I die. Those are the two options that I have. And so she volunteers herself to be the one to go into battle. And immediately Jace is like, hell no. Now, one thing that Rhaenyra says in this scene is, it just sums up why I love Rhaenyra as a character. She says, I needed to know that there was no other path. I needed to explore all options and to be able to say with a clear conscience, I did everything I could. And she says, now I know what I must do. I have tried everything. And nobody in that room on Dragonstone can really fault Rhaenyra because she tried. And she says it all comes down to this. I either win my claim or I die. Those are my two options. Jace says, look, we need to send a dragon to Rook's Rest. Criston Cole, he's pushing and pushing and pushing. We need to act. And then Rhaenyra says one of my favourite lines I think I've ever heard Rhaenyra Targaryen say. Let me quote this directly. There are those who have mistaken my caution for weakness. Let that be their undoing. Yes, yes. The way this resonated in my bones. Now, Rhaenyra goes a bit too far. She says, look, I will go personally. I volunteer myself. And immediately the reaction is, you can't do that. Like, Corlys, Jace, everyone's like, no. You can't go because you are our figurehead. If we lose you, then that's the end. Jace, being Jace, he says, send me, mother, I'll go. And Rhaenyra is having none of that. Like, it's too soon. Too soon after Luke. One thing that really struck me was Rhaenyra saying, look, I will not lose the dragons. I will not throw them into the mix while I sit here cowering in my castle. And that's a very honourable, notable thing to say, yes. However, then we have the realities. Rhaenyra cannot be risked, not yet. Same goes for Aegon, actually. Neither one of them should be at the forefront of the action. Anyway, the discussion becomes academic because Rhaenys steps in and says, allow me. Let me and Melies, let us go to Rook's Rest and we'll take on Criston Cole and his army. This particular frame just broke my heart because I do think that Rhaenyra saw Rhaenys as a second mother. She'd known Rhaenys longer than she had known her own mother, Emma, and they had a very close bond, in spite of the fact that Rhaenys, she probably still thought Rhaenyra and Daemon had a hand in what happened to Laena, because them two got married like the next day. It was all weird, but Rhaenys knows there is a greater situation at hand. She cannot forsake Rhaenyra because that would just be, the house of cards would crumble. Rhaenyra's sons would be targets. If Rhaenys acknowledges the rumours, even if she thinks they are true, she knows it would bring death and destruction upon her family, and she'll do everything she can to avoid that. So she volunteers and says, let me go. And what's interesting is Rhaenys almost seems to be at peace with this. She's very calm, and Rhaenyra kind of reluctantly agrees, like, okay, somebody's going to have to go. It probably should be the person with the biggest dragon, now that Daemon is not around. Now, we juxtapose this Black Council with what's happening in King's Landing, and Aegon, he's getting frustrated, he's bored, he's agitated, and he makes a decision. He jumps into action, and we see him donning his armour. We're going to have to talk about the armour at some point because I was not feeling it. It did not look real or expensive. That for me was a no. But what you do see is Aegon going down to the dragon pit where he comes face to face with his dragon, Sunfire. And we've barely gotten any moments with these two. And what we did get, I absolutely loved it. Like, Aegon looked happier than we'd ever seen him. Sunfire just wanted, boops on the nose. It was a very touching moment. Then it became a hot mess. While Aegon is psyching himself up to do something, we see Rhaenyra having a very considered conversation with Jace. And this is the moment where she shares with him what Viserys had told her, the Song of Ice and Fire. And she says, look, what I'm doing, I'm not fighting for an Iron Throne. I'm fighting for something greater than that. Rhaenyra and Aegon are like night and day. She's very thoughtful and very considered. Aegon is none of those things. And that is the course that we are on. It's almost like the train has left the station. It's racing down the tracks. There's nothing we can do to stop this. It is inevitable. But I would like the record to reflect that Rhaenyra did everything she could, and she's trying to inform everybody. She's trying to do the best she can. I don't know if Aegon is doing the same. We get this moment with Rhaenys as she prepares to leave. Firstly, Rhaenys, you look incredible. That headpiece, it was like a French hood type thing. Loved it. A nice nod, homage to a sort of crown for the queen that never was. Now, just quickly on this scene, Rhaenys says to Melies, we're off to battle again, old girl. Now, if you take it literally, it's incorrect. Melies is not a battle dragon and has never been in conflict. The only two dragons that are still around that have are Caraxes and Vhagar. I mean, there's been moments here and there where Vermithor was used by the Old King as an intimidation tool, but not war as we know it. So I know people are going to say, technically Melies has not been to war, and you're right. But what I do think that we were meant to take away from this scene is that Rhaenys and Melies, firstly, have been so close for multiple decades, 40 years, something like that. They've been close for a long time. And together, they have been fighting battles because Rhaenys is a woman and she was passed over. And Meleys was there for all of that. So they are off to battle again, in a sense, because they've been fighting this fight for decades. And to sort of round out this montage scene, we have Rhaenyra talking to Jace, and she's telling him about the Song of Ice and Fire, Aegon's dream, this huge burden that's been placed on her shoulders by her father, and she in turn is obviously concerned about her own safety, so she wants to pass on the message. And I'm glad that she did, and I'm glad that she trusted Jace enough to do so. And one of the things that she says, it sums up what Rhaenyra is doing. She says, what I'm doing right now, I'm unleashing these dragons, and it's not just for an iron chair. There is a greater struggle, something that is bigger than all of us. And my father, he picked me. He thought I was the best person to do something about this, to help our kingdom. And she can't walk away from that. This is kind of what I mean about Aegon and Rhaenyra being night and day. Rhaenyra has this huge burden on her shoulders. Aegon, he has no idea what she's going through. And he's more concerned about how he looks, and he's not being given the respect as a king. But he's not acting like a king. And Rhaenyra is being thoughtful. She's doing all she can. And to be perfectly honest, it is brilliant. I think I said this last week. Rhaenyra is doing all of these things, so it's very easy for us to defend her. She tried everything. We can't fault her for that. We cut to Aegon flying on Sunfire over King's Landing and heading towards the Crownlands. And everyone outside of Rook's Rest is basically at battle stations. It's about to kick off. And that's when the word comes in where they're all like, dragon! Everyone is ready. There is a dragon incoming. And of course, everyone on the ground is like, is that one of our dragons? Or is that one of the other teams? What's happening? Which one is that? Who's riding it? And of course, it is the queen that never was, Princess Rhaenys of House Targaryen, riding on Meleys, the Red Queen Dragon. And she blasts them with dragon fire. It felt like old school Game of Thrones. It felt like the Loot Train episode. Now, Criston Cole is on the ground and he's got a trick up his sleeve. This is the trap. We're going to lure Rhaenys in and we're going to spring Aemond and Vhagar on her, and matching them up, Vhagar should win. The problem is Aegon arrives, unexpected. He basically throws a spanner in the works because there's no way to communicate. Criston Cole is like, no, this was not part of the plan. What are you doing? Gwaine Hightower is losing his mind. Like, the king is risking his life. It's a whole mess. And we see the two dragons, Sunfire and Meleys, go head to head. It's interesting. Aegon says Dracarys, which is interesting. And Rhaenys says attack, which, from what Eve Best has said about this particular choice of words, it's that Rhaenys, she doesn't have a beef with Aegon personally. It's more a means to an end. I've got to get your dragon out of the mix. And so that was an interesting distinction. And Criston Cole, he's on the ground and he's watching all this unfold, and it's a nightmare. And he's like, where is Aemond? Where is he? What's taking so long? Now, eventually, Aemond does fly in on Vhagar, kind of cumbersome, like lumbering along this enormous dragon. So as Aemond flies in, he sees Meleys and Sunfire and they're going at it. They're kind of in a tussle with each other. And this is where Aemond makes a fateful decision. Aegon looks and sees his younger brother coming to save him. And then Aemond says Dracarys. And Rhaenys is kind of forgotten about in this moment. It's not really about her or Rhaenyra or the war. All of a sudden, this has become very personal between Aegon and Aemond. And it registers on Aegon's face. He's like, oh shit, my brother has come for me? What the fuck? And he's just consumed in this giant fireball, as is Rhaenys. I mean, Aegon is screaming, no. So he knows what Aemond I mean, Aegon is screaming, no, no. He knows what Aemond is intending to do, and that is going to be interesting down the line. And this is where I got so upset watching Sunfire shriek out in agony. The noises this dragon was making, it was heartbreaking. And this is why I'm furious with Aegon as well as Aemond, because Sunfire would not have been there if it wasn't for Aegon. He needed to prove himself. So rather than doing something smart, rather than taking your time and being calculated, he flies off the handle. He does what he thinks is the best thing to prove his strength and to gain some respect. The problem is, he's drunk. He literally can barely keep up. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing. He is driving under the influence. Like, he is literally a DUI dragon rider. And I spoke about this on TikTok. It is so irresponsible of Aegon because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's flying blind into battle. He's never flown into battle before. Neither has Sunfire. They don't know what to expect. And Sunfire doesn't... I mean, they have a choice, I suppose. We've seen moments where dragons will refuse their rider, Alicent Silverwing up at the wall. But in this context, Sunfire is not going to oppose Aegon, and Aegon should have known better than to risk his dragon. So when we see Sunfire falling from the sky, my heart just broke. And Rhaenys, she sees all of this play out, and she has a chance to get away. And yes, on the one hand, strategically, she probably should have just done that. Just fled. We'll deal with Vhagar and Aemond another day. But she does not do that because it's not in her nature. She's not going to walk away. It's not what a Targaryen dragon rider does. In this moment, I don't think Rhaenys is even thinking clearly. It's just the fog of war. So she straps herself into Meleys. She will not be parted from her dragon, and she goes after Aemond and Vhagar. Now, Aemond is the one being chased. How do you like that, kid? It's not fun, is it? He's looking down and he sees this burning wreck where Sunfire has fallen to the ground. He doesn't even make a beeline to try and check on his brother. Instead, he turns Vhagar around and aims her at Meleys and Rhaenys. Now, we get this tussle between the two dragons, and for a minute there, Meleys is gaining on Vhagar. Like, Meleys has the upper hand. Vhagar, it looked a bit dodgy for a moment, and Vhagar's almost on the ground and stomping on people. Criston Cole is knocked out cold in the chaos. We see Rhaenys and Meleys in the sky. They're okay. There is hope. And then, of course, we remember what show we're watching, and Vhagar springs out of nowhere and just goes straight for Meleys' neck. I literally jumped out of my seat when Vhagar pounced. How does Vhagar, the biggest, most cumbersome dragon, keep coming out of nowhere? Like it happened with Luke, now with Rhaenys. Like, what is going on? Enough about Vhagar and Aemond. This moment is about Rhaenys and Meleys. And I spoke about this again, like if you've not seen my TikTok about it, I'm kind of repeating the same talking points, but my heart broke into a million pieces when Meleys turned her head to look at Rhaenys and they both locked eyes. It was devastating. It was just absolutely awful. It reminded me of when Daenerys' dragons were killed on Game of Thrones, even though they're all still alive in the books. That's a different story for a different day. This just broke my heart because Meleys was looking at Rhaenys like, I'm sorry I could not protect you. And Rhaenys is saying, I'm sorry I brought you here in the first place. It was just so tragic. And Vhagar has their jaw around Meleys' neck. It's over. Like, there's no surviving this. And you see the life drain from Meleys. And Rhaenys, she witnesses this. She sees her dragon die, her best friend die, her oldest, most loyal companion die right before her eyes. And that's when Rhaenys just leans back and accepts her fate. Like, I said I would not leave Meleys, I will not leave Meleys. And she did not. And they tumble to the ground together. Then Aemon circles back round and sees the destruction on the ground, sees this dragon, sees the people, the mess, the carnage, the flames, the smoke. It's just awful. And Vhagar flies on, seemingly unscathed. And at first I thought that was it. Like, that was the end of the episode. No. There's one more twist of the knife, which is Aemond is on the ground and Criston Cole finds him standing in front of Sunfire and Aegon. And Aemond, he's just sheathing his sword back into the scabbard. It's this interesting moment of, if Criston Cole was 1 minute late, 30 seconds late, would he have walked in on Aemond killing Aegon? Because that's how it looked to me. And my heart was breaking for poor Sunfire, just a broken dragon, still alive, but just barely clinging on. Like, this dragon will live, but they'll never be the same. And there is Aegon just laid out on the ground. Again, not in a good way at all. And what are you meant to say in these situations? Like, what did he think would happen? He flew into battle. He hadn't consulted his commander. He had no idea what the plan was. Had Aegon and Sunfire just stayed in King's Landing, they would have been fine. Like, this is just, it was all unnecessary. It didn't have to happen. Now, we can talk about whether Aemond and Vhagar versus Rhaenys and Meleys, like what the outcome would be one-on-one. That we can talk about. But Aegon, I can't with him. And poor Sunfire. And that was the Battle of Rook's Rest. We lost Rhaenys, we lost Meleys. Sunfire is in a very bad way. Aegon is in a bad way. Relations between Aegon and Aemond are at an all-time low. Vhagar's the only one who seems to come out of this unscathed. All the people on the ground, those who survive, they're going to be traumatized. And this is the thing. This is the beginning, really, like the first real battle of the Dance of the Dragons. It's only going to get worse from here. I'm not looking forward to it. I mean, I'm looking forward to watching the show, but this was a lot. I knew it was coming, and I still, nearly 24 hours later, I'm upset about this. It's horrible. It was just so upsetting. But having said that, what an episode. Just a huge shout out to Alan Taylor, who directed this episode. It was brilliant. As a neutral, I would say this was phenomenal. I'm just obviously very partial to the dragons and to Rhaenys. Obviously, I'm gutted. But what is interesting is we are now at the halfway mark. We are 4 episodes in, 4 more to go. Now that the Blacks have lost another person, another key member of their team, and another dragon, what's going to happen next? We did see in the promo for episode 5, they are dragging Meleys's severed head through the streets of King's Landing. I'm fuming. I'm absolutely fuming about that, because not only is it disrespectful, it's just stupid, because you're making the dragons look fallible. Why would you do that? It's setting the story up for the storming of the dragon pit, and that's the Greens' doing, for many reasons. We can get into that another day. But yeah, episode 5, all bets are off. The gloves are off. There's no going back now. And you've got to realise that Corlys is going to be heartbroken. Baela, what's she going to do? What about Rhaena when she hears Rhaenyra? Like, the pressure on Rhaenyra is going to be amplified. I'm not ready. I'm really not ready. But yeah, that was my recap. I don't know how long this is going to be all put together. If you've stayed till the end, thank you ever so much. Thank you guys for supporting these longer form videos. I know it's very different from what you guys are used to, even though I do some long videos on TikTok, nothing quite like this. So thank you for your support and for all the likes and comments and subscribes and all that stuff. Thank you ever so much. Please do let me know, what did you guys think? Are we okay? How are we coping? I don't even know what to say, because it's just incredible and it's emotional. And Yes, it's entertainment, but this is just a very moving piece of media because no shade to the humans, and I love Rhaenys, but when the dragons start falling, when they start dropping like flies, I just can't handle it. Do let me know what you guys think, and I will be back next week for episode 5.